This is Cydni.
And I'm Sher. And each week we get together to share with you a message of hope.
It is through our own study and our personal experiences that we offer the reminder to not only seek the light,
but be the light. You can find peace, and there is hope.
And as long as one of us is slightly caffeinated, there will be laughter.
Today's episode is Moving Forward with Gratitude.
And we're so glad you're here.
I'm forging my way through the tip top. I'm living my life through the drip drop when eternity's
Okay, Cydni, this month we wanted to focus on what we can learn from the Pilgrims because it is Thanksgiving this month. Did you remember?
No, because we had a different idea for this month. And then you said, what if we did this? And I can recall the moment where I connected the two very obvious dots because I was reading through your outline during church a little bit, but my kids had my phone, but a little bit I read. And then later I read through all of your ideas and I was like, I like that. And then when we were together, I was like, oh, Pilgrims, because it's Thanksgiving.
I actually saw the light go on. It was pretty epic. There literally was a light bulb above Cydni's head and there was sounds. It was ding, 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 ding when it connected.
It happened. And as much as I had a light bulb go off over my head, the look of disappointment in your eyes, it's like, how did I end up in this mess with this person? Pilgrims, November, Thanksgiving. Oh, okay. That's really what happened. It's true. It did.
It all happened. I was just hoping I had covered my face a little bit better, but apparently not.
No, you didn't. I saw. That's why it's a core memory now. It's like that look of disappointment is so familiar. Where have I seen it before? And I was like, oh, yes. Childhood. At least I connected it eventually. And I think I prepared by believing in you. You know our history, so get to it. Sure.
All right, we'll see what happens. We got the idea from Billy Graham's website.
You got the idea. You could take all the credit.
Well, I can't because I stole it off of Billy Graham's website. But there were several things that we could learn from the Pilgrims, but we chose 4 of them. We chose moving forward with gratitude, practice discipline, enjoy freedom under the law, dream great dreams, but we wanted to start with moving forward with gratitude, and that's what we're going to do today.
Because it's Thanksgiving, a time of being grateful.
Did you notice I had my Thanksgiving shoes on today?
I did. I knew that they were Thanksgiving shoes when I saw the turkey on them.
Can you believe they were on discount?
No, I am so shocked. Those shoes were discounted.
Shocking, huh?
They're amazing, honestly. Bright orange shoes with Thanksgiving decor all over them, as if to say, I'm ready for Thanksgiving. Thank you, Pilgrims, for all you've done. Thank you for walking your many miles. I will now wear these athletic shoes with a turkey on them.
I like them.
I like them too.
Thank you. All right. So with that, the Pilgrims to me are absolutely inspiring and amazing examples of moving forward with gratitude.
But before you continue on, Sher, I have to tell you, I watched a full documentary on the Pilgrims to prepare for this because I know basics, but I watched a full, like if you were in 8th grade and the teacher didn't want to prepare that day and made you watch a documentary, it was an hour long. I watched the whole thing. My brain is so exhausted, but I did it.
You really did?
I did, yeah.
I thought you were going to say you watched like an animated 2-minute cartoon.
No, that's usually my go-to, but there was no cartoons and it was like the History Channel.
That's impressive.
So,
did you like it?
Yeah, I did. It's just that learning makes me feel tired. I usually turn to comedians who will talk about this stuff. So I do feel a little bit drained probably for the next month that I learned something new. But I did, now that I watched that and I looked at your notes, I understood. I knew what was going on.
Feel free to jump in and correct me when I mess up.
I don't remember anything. I recognized it for a moment, which I'm grateful for.
All right, so the Pilgrims, they were being persecuted in England, so they decided to move to Holland. And things didn't work out in Holland the way they wanted, and that's when they decided, you know what, we're going to make a break for it and see if the king will let us go to America. The reason they wanted to do that is because they wanted religious freedom, and they wanted to be able to raise their children in an area where they could actually teach them in the way that they saw the Bible. And so to be able to serve God the way they understood it and not the way the government interpreted the Bible, they really wanted to move to America. William Bradford, one of their leaders, this is what he said about this move. A great hope and inward zeal they had of laying some good foundation, or at least to make some way thereunto, for the propagating and advancing the gospel of the kingdom of Christ in those remote parts of the world. Yea, though they should be but even as stepping stones unto others for the performing of so great a work. So the Pilgrims understood that they were creating stepping stones for us to continue to build the kingdom of God and to move forward with gratitude. And that's what I find so, humbling, if that's the right word, about the Pilgrims, is they understood what they were doing, and they understood that they were only the first step. And they were getting those stepping stones in place so that future generations could continue building upon religious freedom, liberty, and speech and all the things, right? And they knew that's what they were doing.
That part really stuck out to me actually as well, that it was a stepping stone, because I ask myself often, I know the answer, why did the Pilgrims come to America and make that journey? Because the journey is terrifying. And when I was studying for this, I thought to myself, okay, why would the Pilgrims do this? The answer that came to my brain was because they have an eternal perspective. And I thought that really makes such a difference. If you have an understanding of the things that you do now really do affect the future generations, that is such a positive, very unselfish way of living. Whereas now we are in a very much self-help, self-healing, self, look at me and my selfie picture society, that we have to change that. We have to go back to having an eternal perspective. And I also thought having an eternal perspective is how they were able to have gratitude as well, which we'll get into.
That's true. And I'm glad you brought that up, because they did have a different perspective. They understood that they were being led by the Spirit of God, and they had that understanding that they were just the beginning of allowing a religious freedom and building up the kingdom of God. So while the Pilgrims were crossing the Atlantic Ocean, their charter that they had from the King of England was to go near Jamestown, Virginia. On the way over, they got in an absolutely horrible storm. This storm lasted for about 2 weeks, and it blew them completely off course, which is why they ended up in Massachusetts.
Could I say something? When I was listening to this very informative documentary, I did think that God works in mysterious ways. I thought the storm is so bad that they eventually completely leave it in God's hands. They don't try to fight and set the sails a certain way. They just okay, it's in God's hands. And I thought that just feels like my life a lot, that God just throws that storm until I'm like, fine, what do you want? So it was like an intense storm causing them to fully submit. God saying, if you're on my errand, then be on my errand.
And the amount of faith that they had to do that. It's hard for me to do that just in little simple things, let alone in the middle of a storm crossing the Atlantic. That is faith and submitting yourself to God's will. Some of the miracles that occurred, though, in this devastating storm is the main beam of the ship broke. And for some unknown reason, the Pilgrims decided to bring their printing press with them. The printing presses that they had back then were huge. They're this big, huge printing press that had down the center a big screw, kind of like a corkscrew, but it's called a jack screw right in the middle of it. And the question is, why did they bring this printing press? Because they had no materials with them to print anything. But they lugged this huge thing on the boat with limited space. They put it on the boat, and then they get in this storm, and the main beam of the boat breaks. They were able to get that jack screw out from the printing press so they could rebuild that main beam of the ship. The Pilgrims recognized this miracle. Even though they're in the middle of the storm, they recognized that they had the materials to fix something that was unfixable, and they were able to take care of it.
It's like your mother-in-law who overpacks for everything.
Your mother-in-law?
My mother-in-law. No, not mine. Yeah. She's perfect.
Other people's mother-in-laws?
Other people's mother-in-laws.
My sister-in-law's mother-in-law.
They're just so good at packing. You know, there's always someone who overpacks, but then it works out.
It always does.
Like, do you have a piece of gum and some sunscreen and chapstick? And those people that say, yes, I do. This was like, do you have a printing press? I actually packed one.
I told you about my mom and the cheese that she made us pack when we went to Bailey's.
And that she stole stuff from buffets and stuffed it in her pockets to eat later. She would have brought this.
She would have. She would have been the one that said, put the printing press in the ship.
Are you sure we need that? Yes, sir. Put it in. She said, do it, boys. And then she gets to be like, I told you so. I told you so.
And I can hear my dad saying, good hell, Shirley. And then him yelling at us to make sure it got in there.
And then some husbands like, see, Betty, why can't you be more like my mom who packs things that we actually need? Not that Ben has ever said that to me. He got sunburned one time when we were on vacation in the sun. I didn't know to bring sunscreen. I didn't have space for that.
Right? Bring your own sunscreen.
I would have drowned for sure. And everyone with me.
Me too.
Like, I didn't bring anything.
All right. Anyway, another example of a miracle while crossing the Atlantic is John Howland. The Pilgrims stayed below deck most of the time because the storm was so horrible that they couldn't be on deck because they would get soaked. Well, John couldn't take it any longer, and so he went above deck just to get some fresh air. And while he was above deck, a wave hit him, and he was washed off the ship and fell into the ocean in this terrible storm. But there was a rope that was hanging off of the ship, and he happened to grab it. So here he is in this awful storm, holding on to the rope, being tossed and turned, and he is just clinging to this rope for his life. And eventually the Pilgrims started thinking, where did John go? Has anyone seen John? And they went above deck, and there was John in the ocean still hanging on to this rope, and they were able to pull him in.
I wanted to know if there was witnesses. I was about to ask, is this a big fish story, or was there someone who saw it? Good to know.
Yeah.
Not that I was a doubter. I was doubting.
Well, the Pilgrims definitely saw the miracle in this, and John went on to get married, and he had 10 children. And from this, many of their descendants consist of presidents, signers of the Constitution, poets, and actors.
So he went from almost drowning in the ocean to drowning in family life. That a guy.
He did. He was probably wishing he had just drowned.
He's like, God, what did I do so wrong? Why'd you put the rope there?
So the Pilgrims, they could see God's hand as they made it to America, and then the first winter happened. Remember, they were thinking they're going to go someplace near Virginia, and instead they're in Massachusetts, and they were not prepared for a Massachusetts winter. Because of that, there was 100 Pilgrims that came across, and out of that 100, there was 6 or 7 people that were well enough that were serving the 100. And by the time the winter was over, only half of them survived.
Horrible.
I
Do you
don't-
have family on the Mayflower?
Yes.
I think I do too. We're cousins.
Yes, we are.
Like 12th cousins or something, right?
Yeah.
70 times removed. But still, family.
That's-
This is a family podcast.
That's right. The thing that gets me right here is that I wouldn't have wanted to stay. After all of this, I would have said, this is obviously not working out. This is not what God wanted us to do. I'm just going to go back. The next ship that shows up, I'm going to get on it and I'm going to leave. That's what I would have wanted to do.
I don't think I would want to get back on a boat or ship, though. I would be in a bad place.
We'd be dead.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have lasted the first winters.
That's why we're in this time and age, not then.
Right.
Because God knows what he's doing.
All right. The Pilgrims, they didn't give up because they understood that they needed to keep moving forward and putting down the stepping stones that they knew that they were supposed to be laying. After the winter, with only 50 left alive, 2 Native Americans showed up, Samoset and Squanto. In Squanto, he was fluent in English, and he helped the Pilgrims. He taught them how to survive in this new climate.
I did read, though, the other guy, Samoset, he did also know a little bit of
He
English.
knew a little bit. When he met them, he introduced himself in English.
And said he wanted bread and beer. That's what it said.
Really?
Yeah, in the documentary.
I wish I would have known that when I was teaching. That would have been great.
According to history.com on YouTube.
My students would have loved that.
I loved it. I mean, obviously, it's what I took away from it.
Obviously. All right. So with gratitude after that first winter and after help from Squanto, they learned how to survive in that climate with the help of their new friends. And a little bit over a year after they arrived, they wanted to have a Thanksgiving to celebrate their journey and that they had survived that first year.
And this is where it all ties together for everybody, the Thanksgiving and the Pilgrim story, because it's November. Ding.
Now think about this. They were blown off course, were in a terrible storm. Half of them died. It was hard and miserable, but they wanted to celebrate all the good that had happened. They were grateful that they could worship in the way that they wanted to. They were grateful for their new friends and for all the miracles that they had witnessed. They invited their neighbors. There were about 90 members of the Wampanoag tribe that came and celebrated the first Thanksgiving. It lasted 3 days. There was sports and activities and lots of gratitude and thanking God that they had made it through that first year.
I did want to say, since our last episode was on hunger and thirst, I had the thought that if God wants us to hunger and thirst after something that's important, he allows us to know what it feels like to go without it, just like without food or without water. We appreciate it more. And I just thought these people have lived in a land where they didn't get to worship the way they wanted to. They were told how to do things, and now they're in a land for a year where they get to do it how they want to. And I think that helps with the gratitude, that the reason they could be grateful during all of this chaos and the struggles and the death is because they know what it feels like to go without the things that they traveled for, that they sacrificed for.
That's true. And as you were saying that, I thought these were people, they had been persecuted for what they believed in England. I'm sure that even though they had so many trials, just like you said, that this was like a breath of fresh air to not be persecuted for their beliefs. Even though the struggle was horrible, at least they were able to live the way they thought they should, the way that God wanted them to live, which was probably the greatest miracle of all to them. So the stepping stones that the Pilgrims left for us is the beginning of religious liberty and trusting that God is guiding our path as we move forward, and then showing gratitude to God for that. Now, I had this thought. Today is election day where we are voting for a new president. And I feel that everybody, no matter who you're voting for, everyone gets all uptight and upset about the thought of the other person might win. But God can use anything for his good. And that is something that no matter who or what I vote for or whatever the outcome is, God can use everything in every situation for his own good. Look at what he did for the Pilgrims. He used persecutions. He used getting blown off course. He used a terrible first winter. And all of these things God used to build this country, to set a foundation of religious liberty, to open the doors and opportunities for people to worship the way they want, to give us those natural rights that are God-given rights that he has given us. These were the stepping stones that he had the Pilgrims build. So here we are today, not knowing who's going to win the election. But you know what? It doesn't matter if you are a follower of God. If we are faithful and we move forward with gratitude, he will take any situation and make it right and build something better and grander out of it.
You're right. There's nothing that you or I or anyone else can do that will throw off God's plan. We're not that powerful that he's like, oh no, I didn't see that coming. How will we move forward? He's in complete control no matter the outcome.
And it didn't stop there for the Pilgrims. You think, oh, the first Thanksgiving, yay, everything was better after that. But it wasn't, because then the next year they had a drought. So now they're not going to have enough food again. But the Pilgrims, they believed that they were building the kingdom of Christ, and they believed that they were the stepping stones for something bigger and better. And so the Pilgrims fasted and they prayed, and it rained. And then they showed their gratitude again. There's a pattern here. Number one, just keep moving forward. Even if it's hard and there's going to be trials, just keep moving forward. The Pilgrims were saved by miracles. Then they showed their gratitude to God for that miracle. Even though they had to go through these hard times and trials, they showed their gratitude for the miracle. They recognized that miracle, and then the cycle repeated itself over and over again. That's what we see. Just in those few stories, there were hard times, there was a miracle, and there was gratitude. Repeat. It's the same thing. So how many times have I been on my little journey moving forward, and then a trial came, and then I got grumpy, and then that was the end of it?
I did think that when you talked about their cycle, how many of us were in a trial and then immediately grateful? We usually take a minute to be bitter and angry and ungrateful probably. So it made the cycle sound really simple and easier than what I found it to be.
I agree, because there have been times that I never got out of the cycle. I don't know what was on the other side because I just gave up.
Yeah, we're like both literally angry right now as we record this. We're just angry all the time.
But it happens. You get stuck and you don't know what was on the other side because you gave up. But the Pilgrims didn't do that. They teach us to keep going and to show that gratitude, because eventually the miracles will come.
But then again, it's your eternal perspective. Are you in the place you planned? No. Did God put you where you are? Yes.
And that's the perspective that they had. Absolutely. Sometimes, though, our great plans of moving forward, we do get blown off course. Like the Pilgrims, they were planning on being in a more moderate climate near Virginia. They weren't prepared for the cold Massachusetts winter. Even though half of them died, they didn't get bitter or give up and go back to England. They chose to stay on the path that God chose for them and show gratitude. Just exactly what you said, Cydni.
Bam.
That's right.
A pioneer story that I love on this concept is about a family that has a settlement in the late 1800s. The family looked forward every year to one day off they got where they'd go have a family picnic, and the trees produced the sappy stuff that they'd make gum out of. It was a very exciting time for all of the children, and the kids knew the day was coming. So every day they would ask, is it time yet? And the great day came where the father said, it's time. Unfortunately for one of the daughters, the dad came to her and said, Belle, this year I'm going to need you to stay with little Joe. He's too little to make the journey, and mom needs to go. Probably Ma needs to go. So you need to stay and tend to Joe. And she was as heartbroken as a pioneer girl could possibly be. She had been the one to pack the lunches. She got everything ready to go, and now she had to stay home. The family left, and she sat completely distraught over her circumstance. Then she had the thought, well, Pa said you better watch Joe, but he didn't say you have to watch Joe here. So what she decided to do was take her little toddler brother and walk to the picnic. In her mind, she thought, if we walk there and show up, he will be so proud of me that I got this done, that he'll let me stay and let me participate. The only way to get there on time with the family was to go through what they called the sink, and they weren't allowed to go this direction. But again, if she proved herself, he would be very proud and she'd get to stay. So she grabbed her little toddler brother and she headed through the sink. When she was halfway through, she saw that half of the path was taken out by a landslide. She thought, well, I can't really see the path, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cross it. So she picked up Joe and started walking across all of the mud and the rocks. But that triggered the mudslide to continue, and it started to fall down off of somewhat of a cliff situation. As the rocks started to fall, Belle said to herself, we're going to die. She could feel it happening. And she said to herself, I will say a quick prayer and I will pray like I've never prayed before. And she did. And she prayed for forgiveness for disobeying her father and prayed to protect her and her little brother. With that, immediately she felt presence pick her up and put her back on the path. One thing I love so much about this story, Sher, is she says, I did not get put back on the path that I wanted to go on. I was picked up and put on a path heading back home. And I knew that was God telling me to turn around. You're going the wrong way. Please head back home now. And with that, she said she promised and dedicated her life to Christ. She went home with her little brother, Joe, and she says, I was so grateful that he wasn't old enough to talk because I knew he wasn't going to tell on me. And so they headed back home. She got home safely. He was home safely, and she got to reading her scriptures and prayer and dedicated her life to Christ. So Belle thought the story was over. She knew it had a great impact on her, but again, her little brother couldn't talk, and she was not about to tell anybody that she went through the sink. So she would dedicate her life and did, and would serve a mission at a time when it wasn't very common for females to serve a mission. When she returned home, her little brother Joe would leave for a mission. While Joe was gone, her dad pulled her to the side and said, I need to talk to you, Belle. And he asked her, Belle, was there a time that you went to the sink and you were in danger? She was shocked. And she said, how do you know about this? And he said, well, while you were on your mission, Joe fell very, very sick and he had the fever. And in his delirium with the fever, he started to talk. And he told us that when he was a little boy, that you took him through the sink to catch up with the family on the picnic. And that while you guys were walking, a mudslide was triggered and you guys almost died. And he said 3 angels came and picked the 2 of you up and put you back on the path. Did that happen? She said she didn't see the angels, but she felt them. And she did wonder, why did he get to see the angels and I didn't? She concluded after prayer and pondering that she was the one who disobeyed. So she was still protected and blessed, but Joe was so innocent that he got to see what was really happening. When Joe returned to his full health, he didn't remember the story and he never would remember it again. But Belle would talk about it. She became a poet and a writer, and she lived faithfully her whole life. But the story just illustrates that if we keep moving forward, even if we make mistakes, that angels will attend us and they will put us back on our path. And like you said, no matter what direction we're going, God's in charge and he will make the most out of every situation. And the idea of gratitude and moving forward, I felt so much gratitude in this story for the ability that we have to repent and make the changes that we need to make. It is a beautiful thing that we are never too far gone, that we're not too lost, that we're too old and things are not going the way that we want them to. But there's miracles at our fingertips if we believe and have faith. And I feel so grateful for that fact.
I do too, because we're all going to mess up. But if we try to course correct and if we start following God's will, he will be there. He's not going to give up on us. He's always going to be there to help us. If we call out to him, he will be there. President Monson said, quoting Matthew, "And he took the 7 loaves and the fishes and gave thanks and brake them and gave to his disciples and the disciples to the multitude." Notice that the Savior gave thanks for what they had, and a miracle followed. And they did all eat and were filled. And they took up of the broken meat, and there was left 7 baskets full. Still quoting President Monson, "We have all experienced times when our focus is on what we lack rather than our blessings." Said the Greek philosopher, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has." First of all, I want to say I actually stole this from you, Cydni, in another podcast that we did. So thank you, Cydni.
You're welcome.
But the Pilgrims had a choice. They had a choice to dwell on all the bad things that had happened and become angry and bitter. But they chose to get to work and to be grateful and to see the miracles and be stepping stones for their descendants. President Monson further said, "Regardless of our circumstances, each of us has much for which to be grateful if we will but pause and contemplate our blessings. This is a wonderful time to be on earth. While there is much that is wrong in the world today, there are many things that are right and good. We can lift ourselves and others when we refuse to remain in the realm of negative thought and cultivate within our hearts an attitude of gratitude. If ingratitude be numbered among the serious sins, then gratitude takes its place among the noblest of virtues. Someone has said that gratitude is not only the greatest of virtues, but the parent of all others." So now it's our turn. Here we are, and we're adding to the stepping stones that the Pilgrims made for us. And God might blow us off the course that we wanted or we thought that we should be on, but he knows what's best for us. He knows what's best for this country. He knows what's best for all the children of the world. And if we show gratitude in that journey, we will see the miracles.
We've talked a lot about gratitude in our podcasting career, Sher, and we all know that gratitude plays a key role in people's happiness and well-being. We've heard stories that gratitude has helped someone heal completely, even someone who was told they were going to be paralyzed, that they sat and they thought about all the things that they're grateful for, and then they were healed. We've heard this, and a thought that came to me was that we know gratitude can trigger miracles. The epidemics we face right now in our society is loneliness and depression and anxiety. That means if we can practice gratitude, then we can heal loneliness, anxiety, and depression. So maybe it's a topic that is talked about a lot, but like you said, probably because it's apparent to all other virtues and it matters.
This brings us to our final thoughts. The Pilgrims exemplify the power of moving forward with gratitude. Regardless of the hardships, they just kept on going. They were seeking religious freedom. They left England, they survived storms, and endured a brutal winter in a new land. Even when they were blown off course, they held fast to their mission, finding divine guidance through small miracles, like repairing their ship's beam or the survival of John Howland. Friends like Samoset and Squanto helped them adapt, and with gratitude, they celebrated the first Thanksgiving, inviting their Wampanoag neighbors to join them. Their legacy of resilience shows a pattern: facing trials, recognizing the blessings, and then showing gratitude. The Pilgrims' choice to keep going reminds us to do the same, making each step a foundation of faith for those who follow after us.
Our challenge this week is to take time every single day of November and find something to be grateful for.
This is our prayer
From Cydni and Sher.
I'm forging my way through the tip-tip-top. I'm living my life through the drip, drip, drop. When eternity's plan, I just can't stop. I'm making my way through the drip, drip, drop.
They weren't prepared for the cold Massachusetts winter. Massachusetts?
Okay, I just have to remember how I want to tell the story because it's in pink and it's standing out a lot, so don't want to mess it up. I'm feeling a lot of pressure because you put the font in pink. I prefer it to be in pink. I like what you did there. Okay, focus. All right. Okay. I'm going to tell you a story, and then Sher, maybe you could make it tie together with the Pilgrims, even though it's a pioneer and it's 200 years later. That's fine. 240 years later. That's fine, right?
Yeah, I'm up for the challenge.
It's just a story. Who doesn't want a story?
Everyone wants a story.
I know, and you want this one because it's good. I'll try to do it justice. A pioneer pilgrim. I'm out of breath again, becoming a common thing. It's like I've never talked before. Okay.
Making each step.
Let me just do some jumping jacks.
Have a good week.
Bye.